Oh, I love recording in progress. This chair around the other side.
This one.
Yes, so I can interview you like you're in a talk show. It's over the course. And you're
So then.
okay. Do you want me to get down there? Blocking the talk. This is talking to you about this. My last one was to make cuts out of on the right.
Just one more. Ready?
Is it better for this line or just a little bit? Is that helpful or not? Yeah, we just messed everything up for you, didn't we?
No, it actually worked much better. You solved the problem for me.
I'm just trying to see if it helps.
Sometimes it does.
Seems like maybe not a dark hole.
You still need 360 views.
You can just sit there and rotate.
Okay. Yes, have seats up here. If you're brave.
No, we still.
Three rooms. Do pictures. I will show you. I have.
All right, welcome everybody. I am Amy Corey, a professor here in religious studies, and I'm going to introduce you guys to Dr. Esther Mombo, who's going to be here with us today and tomorrow. So this is one of two opportunities to hear what Dr. Mombo has to say. The second opportunity is tomorrow for the Steele Center lecture, which is at 7 o'clock in Mills A. So hope you guys can make it. What we thought we would do, I'm going to tell you a little bit about who Dr. Mombo is, and then we're going to sort of, I'm going to interview her. So it's like you guys get to see a live Oprah show. People have said that we have a lot in common. And so I'll ask her some questions to give some context for what the Circle of Concerned African Women Theologians is, which she's going to be talking about today. And then we thought we would open it up and you guys can ask all kinds of questions. So Dr. Mombo is coming to us right now today via Atlanta, where she has been a visiting scholar at Columbia Seminary. But she hangs her hat at St. Paul's University in Limuru, Kenya, which is just outside Nairobi. Dr. Mombo is also spends time with both Anglicans and Quakers and has spent time with both the Anglicans and Quakers since being here. She's a very sought after speaker. And she was the former deputy vice chancellor of St. Paul's, so she was kind of over the academic programs. And now she is a lecturer in the Department of Theology, though Dr. Mombo is a religious historian by trade, and she did her PhD at the University of Edinburgh. Do you want, when did you finish your PhD?
I don't want to say that.
All right, just know that it happened, and that's all you need to know.
I didn't get a PhD.
It worked. So we're so happy to have her here today and to learn a little bit more about the Circle. Those of you that have had classes with me before have probably read some of the Circle's work, but for those of you who are not familiar, this is a great time to get to know it. So, Dr. Esther Mombo. Dr. Mombo, why don't you start by just telling us what the Circle of Concerned African Women Theologians is, and maybe give us a little bit of some history and context.
Thank you so much for, when she was introducing me, I wasn't sure who she was introducing, but it is me. Grateful to be here and thank you for coming out to hang out with me this evening. The Circle of Concerned African Women Theologians is an interfaith organization in Africa and also in some parts of the diaspora that brings together theologians, religious studies people, teachers, researchers who are women. And their aim is to research on women, religion, and culture. The Circle was founded by a woman called Professor Mercy Amba Uduyoye. We call her Auntie Mercy. And on Friday, we celebrated her 90th birthday. So we're very happy to have her found the circle and has been our advisor, our leader in many ways. Why did she start the circle? Mercy Amber Obiore studied in Cambridge, studied in Ghana, and studied also in Cambridge, and began working as a professor of the university in religious studies, and then worked with All Africa Conference of Churches and also worked with the World Council of Churches as an ecumenical organization. Mercy noted that in the spaces that she worked, she realized that the churches were full of women in terms of the congregation. When it came to the leadership, she didn't see any women. In many spaces, she was alone. So she noted there were very few women in leadership, and she began asking herself why. Then she also noted that in terms of writing theology or written theology, there was very little written by women, on women, and from women's perspectives. Asking herself questions, she realized it was because of the ways the Bible was read for Christians, or the ways in which other texts of scripture were read and interpreted. She also noted it was due to culture. And she began a mission. She began a mission of looking for women who had done religious studies or who are doing theology, and put together a band of these women. And some of them say the first meeting, they just met and talked about the stories and their challenges and the ways in which they worked or studied. Then in 1989, she organized a conference in Ghana, and it is in this conference at Trinity College level that the 69 women met, young, middle-aged, and old, across the board and across disciplines, and they backed the circle. So when you ask why did she call it the circle, she has a point about why she called it the circle. She says the circle expands forever. It covers all who wish to hold hands, and its size depends on each other. It is a vision of solidarity. It turns outward to interact with the outside and inward for self-critique. A circle expands forever. It is a vision of accountability. It grows as others move to grow. A circle must never have a center, but a single dot does not make a circle. One tree does not make a forest. A circle is a vision of cooperation, mutuality, and care. So it is called a circle because it expands. And at the moment, the circle has celebrated 30 years of existence. 2019, we celebrated 30 years. And the next year's conference, it is called Sankofa, is a return to where it began. So the next year's conference is going to be in Ghana. And we are praying that Mercy will still be there.
So part of the way the circle's expanded is that there's different local chapters, right, across sub-Saharan Africa, and one of those is in Kenya. So do you want to talk specifically about the work the circle does in Kenya?
So the structure of the circle is we have a continental coordinator, and currently it is Professor Musa Dube, the post-colonial feminist, who is now a professor at Canada University. She's the continental coordinator. And then there are chapters in different places that where there are women theologians or religious studies women or researchers or whatever, they form a circle. So in one country, you can find different chapters and around the same themes, around studies, so they form a circle. So Kenya has different chapters, but we have one umbrella body where we all come in. They meet in different institutions, but then we meet together as a Kenyan chapter. The Kenyan chapter has a coordinator, who's Dr. Teresia Musili, and I coordinate the East African region. So I bring together Ethiopian chapter, Uganda chapter, Kenya chapter, Tanzania chapter, and Rwanda chapter.
How often do you guys meet as regional?
Regional, we online, yes,
Uh-huh.
but we haven't managed to meet physically. But in country, chapters also meet physically.
So what are some specific projects that are going on at St. Paul's in particular with the chapter?
The aim of the circle is to do research, right, on women, religion, and culture. For theological students who are in St. Paul's, it is both doing that, meeting and sharing research pieces that they are interested in, but also is a meeting of fellowship and supporting one another in their journey as students. In terms of writing, different chapters produce different books. In Kenya, there's a manuscript now on COVID-19, which is not yet complete. They had done work on HIV and AIDS, just like the other chapters.
So tell us a little bit, give us a little autobiography for you. And how did you kind of come into the Circle's way? How did you get into this world?
So I wasn't there in the beginning. I was not among the 69 who met in 1989.
You weren't even born in 1989, were you?
Anyway, I wasn't there in 1989, but I had several of friends from Kenya who attended it. So in the likes of currently the Right Reverend Emily Onyango, who is a bishop in the Anglican Church. We have the first woman who was made minister in the Presbyterian Church, Reverend Dr. Nyambura Njoroge, and others who attended the first meeting in 1989. My journey of study is growing up in a village and seeing the realities of women in the village, but not being able to name them, questioning why there were issues of violence, for example, gender-based violence, and wondering why, but not having a lot of answers to it. But I was brought up by a grandmother who for me was my first feminist, who was able to give a home to those that were being violated. She would prepare a safe space for them before they go. And I was always asking her questions, why does this happen? As you say, it's because of culture, it's because of patriarchy, and agreed with me that it is wrong. But then you don't have the language to put it in. So when I finished my undergraduate studies, my interest was really to work in a learning institution where I could teach, but I wanted to teach young adults or adults. I wasn't happy to teach children. I wanted to teach people I could talk with and like that. So I went and taught in high school, but I wasn't satisfied with that. So I did my theology degree and then went to teach in a theological institution. And for me, teaching in those spaces exposed me to see how both studying and teaching exposed me to how patriarchy is rooted both in the Bible and rooted in the African culture. So when I did my PhD, the circle had started and there was going to be a second conference. And the second conference is titled Women, Religion and Culture. And people were writing from different perspectives about culture. But the theme was the household of God. And I said the circle is both Christian, Muslim, and African religions, that we bring in women from all the religious traditions that are in Africa. Why? Because all of them struggle under interpretations of religious texts and also the way culture is used. So when I was introduced to the circle, the ways in which the circle read the text, the ways in which the circle interpreted the text, the aim and goals of the circle, I felt this is where I want to be. I want to be in a space where I'm able to bring to light the invisibility, the muted voices, and especially in the church like Mercy, seeing a lot of them that are members, but they are not in leadership. They manage the church, they support the church with their gifts, both material and even emotional gifts, but they are not. When I went to teach in my current university, the Faculty of Theology, where I was based, had about 10 women, a man, and 100 men. So you never saw them
In the student body.
You never had them, you never saw them. And so for me, it was how do you increase the numbers of these students who are studying? Because when you have most of them empowered theology, then they have a way of going back and seeking positions of leadership. So I joined the circle because the aim of the circle resonated with me. I joined the circle because that's where women scholars of theology and religion were. And I joined the circle because I felt it's an empowering space for the women. And I have not regretted.
So you said when you started, there were about 10 women per 100 men. How many women do you think are at St. Paul's now?
Over the years, maybe from 2004 to today, we produce nearly 300 women that are outside. At the moment, the numbers are maybe 50 and 80 there.
50 women for 80 men. So don't be modest. What kind of role do you think you played in getting those women in higher education?
One is to ensure that there is a safe space for them to study. And two is to do away with policies that would deny them to come and study. For example, if people wanted to be church leaders, they would go through, they go before a panel to allow them to go and study. But in the panel, they would face questions that maybe they are difficult to respond to. For example, using the theological language, you feel called to go and study. And people question that call as a woman because religious organizations, especially the church, hasn't been a safe space for women's leadership and because of texts. So for me, it was like, how do you deal with that policy so that women are able to study, to be theologically empowered, then to be able to argue their cases? So one of the policies was to delink ordination into leadership and theological education. So I said that people can just study. Let everybody study. Let theology be for the people of God. And then after that, you can then check whether they are called for ministry, and then you can. And doing away with that policy opened the gate for many women to come and to study, and most of them in leadership now. And so that for me was one. Secondly, it was economic. Education is investment in most of the countries that I come in Africa, but also in Kenya. And theological education, for that matter, is an investment. So you invest in somebody who's going to be working with you. Don't invest in somebody who may go away through marriage, for example. They may marry somebody else and then they don't come to work for the particular person. So economically, it was difficult for women to access funding to study. So what that meant was to look for funding that would help the women to study. And then thirdly was to ensure that every woman was welcome to study, other than a particular group of women, but every woman who felt that that was their interest, they were allowed to study.
I have more questions, but I just want to pause it. I mean, does anyone have anything they want to ask Dr. Mombo? I gotta go on with that. So one of the things that the circle in particular has written prolifically about the problem of HIV and AIDS in sub-Saharan Africa. And there's been a shift in the past few years to start thinking about ecological devastation. So I'm curious about how you see those two things connected. What's the connection between HIV and the environment?
So from 1969, the circle has worked on different themes, sometimes on a single theme, sometimes looking at it in an intersectional way. And those themes have included culture. And in culture, they look at ways in which certain cultural practices are not affirming to women. And those cultures that are affirming to women, they are of course accepted. So there's been an objective critique of culture, not doing away with culture like the colonial context, but saying within the culture it has a purpose. And if it is used negatively on women, then over the years they have read texts from a liberative perspective. And they have also looked at issues of gender-based violence. From 2000, with a conference in Ethiopia, HIV was decimating villages. There were so many orphans. It was just a time to die because there was no antiretroviral medication. People were just dying, and the younger generation was dying, leaving children. And so the circle decided we need to research and talk about HIV. Why? Because HIV became a mirror or a lens with which they could write. Because HIV forced people to talk about gender issues. They forced us to talk about issues of sexuality. They forced us to talk about gender-based violence. They forced us to talk about cultural practices that even increased the infections. And 2000, we labeled HIV because it was the problem. And 2007, again, HIV with more topics, things like intergenerational sex, where you found older men going out with younger women, and younger women being infected and later infecting younger men. So looking at issues like that, issues of culture, of course. And then 2013, they were still writing on HIV because the challenges of HIV are still there even today, looking at issues of stigma, issues of discrimination. So there was a whole theme of health and healing, but focused on HIV because HIV is what was the pandemic that was destroying people. Then in 2019, they said we need to add on issues of environment, issues of climate change, because of the many challenges that we're seeing, whether you're talking about cyclones or floods, they're talking about drought, seeing that there were changes, and those changes impacted women. Because if there was drought, and food, women are supposed to put food on the table. If there is deforestation, women have to walk far to look for firewood. And as they go to look for firewood, they meet with other dangers on the rape, walking, dangers, snake bites. But you find that women spend so many hours just looking for water. If it's a question of floods, of course, again, when livelihood is destroyed, women suffer more. They care for the children, and so they thought, no, we need to start interrogating the ways in which, not just pandemics, but the ways in which climate change impacts women. And we want to look at it from the perspective of pure perspective of religion. And in that matter, then they are questioning the fact that if the world has been created by God and we have been put there as stewards, how come we now have a theology of exploitation, a theology that doesn't care for the other, a theology that basically destroys that? So for women theologians is to link climate change to pandemics and to other issues of society. So you keep looking at the interconnectedness of these issues and the way they impact on women. So the current research pieces is about pandemics, women, culture, so climate change, pandemics, climate change, and so people they write from philosophy, they write from theology, they write from social science, they write from cultural perspectives, but always is to ensure that how is it impacting on women, and what are the resources that can help in terms of helping these women as they struggle with these challenges.
Any other question? So as you're doing this work, as you're writing and creating scholarship, I guess one question I would have is who do you imagine is the audience? What's the sort of goal? Why scholarship? Why is this the area? And religious and theological studies in particular.
Within the African context, religion has power to convene and convince. Religion and culture are significant motifs in the ways in which society is structured, in the ways in which society attends to the needs of the people. For women in particular, religion, theology, culture hasn't been a friendly space. Because those that teach religion, those that write religion, those that research on religion have been men. The consumers of religion have been women. And so taking those things to write is to say that you can read and write it differently. We can critique this text. We can offer a different way. So there, for example, there's one of the books that says other ways of reading, that there's other ways you can read, for example, the Bible. So who is the audience? Massey discovered that a lot of theological literature had been written by women. A lot of religious literature had. And that was influencing society because religion was taught in schools, religion was taught in universities, and the people who consumed this religion, who went to become leaders were men, but the people who struggled with it. So the audience in terms of academic writings are university students, religious leaders, and other academics. So encouraging academics or scholars to include these books in their other than just thinking they are for women, but encouraging that they can be put in bibliographical data and they can be used as texts rather than seeing it is just stories of women. Those stories are important. We all live and we listen to stories. So the audience is the but there are also writings that are prayers, songs, and poems that are for ordinary use. So it's not just academics, but there's also other aspects that are ordinary. So prayers about climate, songs about climate, about pandemics, about healing and wholeness. Those ones are for ordinary.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much for coming and speaking to us about what you do and the circle. My question is, I can use an example of like internalized misogyny, how people who have internalized a lot of like patriarchal domination and all that, especially women, can still hold to it and refuse like the liberal or perspective. Have you met with that in your work? And how has that journey been for women in those spaces who are bringing this whole new perspective and they may not want to engage with it?
Very threatening, very, very threatening. threatening because you've been there for many years, and this is the way things have been done. And liberation is threatening to even those that need it most. You are really threatened with what is going to happen if I drop what I have held strongly and take on this new. And what is this new way of looking at this? The members of the circle are aware of that. And even in my own theological space, you meet women who say that's a wrong way. They would even say, dismiss it and say that is Western. We're just becoming a Western feminist. And the word feminist, of course, is fear. It's a word that evokes a lot of anger. And both men and women fear that. And you find men being very critical and telling women, don't follow this band of women. Because of being aware of that, we break the information into ways in which we can engage dialogue. So rather than saying, well, they don't understand, you create a space of that. So you go to women's groups and break down some of these things. Like for Christians, we know that the Bible is an important text. So you do Bible study in a different way, so that they are able to see that actually, there's another way of reading this. Secondly, sometimes the division is magnified when it is not there. Because those women know that this space is not safe, but they don't have the language of speaking. I said earlier that my grandmother for me was the first feminist. And my grandmother used to say, she went to church, and she used to say, the leadership is a space of jackets. So she never used the word patriarchy, but the fact that she used the idiom that it is jackets, the men wearing jackets and they are in leadership, she was a feminist. The fact that she would say that women are not given the space to teach. So she knew. So many of these women, though afraid, they do know. The circle is a small organization, it's not a big one. It's not as big as the larger women's organizations that are wings of maybe political organizations or are wings of religious organizations. For example, I use the Anglican Church, which is in most parts of Africa, the organization called Mothers Union. It's a very strong one. They manage the churches, they run the spaces. Now, if you go with other ways of reading, they'll tell you, we know our place. But it's inviting them to a space and reading with them, especially their favorite text of the Bible that has been used against them, and reinterpreting them. And then people say, oh, wow. So finding allies in those groups. Secondly, is finding allies among the men. So we have those we call brothers who are able to critique patriarchy themselves, so that it is not us attacking or critiquing patriarchy, but they themselves critique patriarchy on how even patriarchy has destroyed them. So when you have allies as brothers and you have these allies as other groups, then you are forging forward with the So SACO members will say, we have crossed rivers, but we still have oceans ahead. But we can continue to dive in to see that we cross. So awareness and finding ways of creating. But very, very important too, that it's so ingrained. You grow up and it is instilled in you. You think it's the norm. So the circle tries to bring to light that which has been normalized. Visibilize that which is invisible. And especially the work around gender-based violence, that has really opened up. Because you are talking about the lived realities of most women. Most women violated in what is a safe space, their own homes, their own families, or the sacred space. And saying you can speak about it. And looking at texts of scripture that also have those cases of violence. So saying that the fact that cases of rape are, for example, in the Bible, means that patriarchy did not start the other day. But they are not there to say they are right. They are there so that they help us to interrogate our own safe spaces.
Yeah.
So since the circle is an interfaith group, how has that unity been difficult or positive?
Right, how has it been difficult or positive? One, the circle does not go into the doctrinal issues that divide. They are not there to debate how many angels can turn or who saw God first and who didn't. The circle is there to ask what is the lived reality of heaven and how has this lived reality been impacted by the ways text are being. So you have women from the Islamic faith coming up to say, this is what the Hadith says, but this is what the culture says. And the culture is followed much more than all the Quran. So interpreting it and writing about it. This is, we are told that women have everything the Quran has provided for, but in reality, that's not how it is. So no starting from whether Jesus was the Son of God or the Son of Man. Those doctrinal debates have been there and they continue to be there. But what is the lived reality? What is my problem now? My problem now is violence. My problem now is poverty. So you begin from the location of the people. And so in some places, depends on the people you have places where there are more Christians and there are places where there are more Muslims. And women theologians, you find, are not as many in Islam as they are in Christianity or in religious studies as for that matter. In fact, the reason why we have religious studies is because then you find women who are interrogating. Maybe they are not there. While Christians are women bishops, for example, maybe you will not find that among Muslims. Or so you bring them together, but to interrogate the differences. Because climate change is no respecter of any faith. When it comes to deforestation, Muslim women, Christian women, whoever, you suffer because of your gender. You don't suffer because of your stagnation. That's where we start from. Hence,
so I'm curious to know, so some of this focus is mostly on like religions. Are there ways in which where belief in traditional cultures, religions, or like other beliefs have interfered with the work of the circle, either positively or negatively?
Like the African indigenous religion, that right, yeah, it hasn't become an interference, but it has become a source, a very important source, because we know that people who are Christians, they are impacted by that life. So for us, is to interrogate it. Whether you are looking at it in terms of marriage customs, for example, the circle writes about that. What are the positive customs from that religious worldview, and what are the negative? So, for example, how does patriarchy in colonialism and patriarchy in Africa, patriarchy in Christianity impact on them? In three of them, there is patriarchy. How do they do? What is positive in Africa that we can? The Matthew will write about the community. How does being in community help us to deal with issues of poverty? And also we will interrogate how does community impact women negatively in social level, how does it? So the African market, African good source. These are sourced positively, but it's also a source to critique. And so we embrace it, you go back to it, and you study the culture, and you're able to say, actually, this culture is affirming, this culture is not affirming. And then we look at it in terms of not confrontation. The circle discusses theology from a position of creating space to dialogue rather than confrontation. And that is why when people hear feminism, they think of feminism as confrontation. But Mercy will tell you that you go in with wisdom. So you engage even religious leaders with respect. You engage religious leaders with understanding. Because you also sympathize that what they practice is what has been taught to them. So you begin from that position and you're able to interrogate people. And the end result is that we need to see a culture of faith that affects lives, not only lives of women, but also lives of men. Mercy will argue that we need both to be in this society. There's no way one group is going to go up with the other. We need it.
Any questions? So one thing you said about the circle is this idea of turning inward for self-critique and expanding outward. I'm curious about what that has been like for you all now. Sort of what kind of things have you learned along the way, and what are some things that you feel like you're moving towards with this newer generation of scholars that are under the circle?
One of the things is that every circle member is asked to do is to mentor. And mentoring is not easy. And so that's why if you look at a lot of the books that the circle produces is communal writing. Right? And in communal writing, you are saying you don't want to leave your sisters just because they just graduated and they are not able to produce an act. We don't need to hand. So there are avenues of helping with others. So for the older generation, looking at themselves critically and saying, we will not be here forever. So you need to bring on the others. And secondly, we say it is a vision of accountability. It's like, what type of academic world are you handing over to the others? You're not handing over the academic world of male theologians who competed to write and to say they have the right theology and the others have. Here is not competing, it's being accountable to the community, and we are being accountable to the community of scholars. And not just write, but to support. We use idioms like you provide your shoulders for others to stand on, to see where you never saw, and encouraging that. So that the intergenerational support provides that vision of inward critique. So now we have like three. You have matriarchs, and then you have rising stars. What is happening now is we have particular books where young scholars are critiquing the theology of the older scholars. So, for example, somebody is working, looking at Mercy, and there are several books that have come out of Mercy, and it's younger scholars reading that theology and saying that how applicable it is, or the works of or the works of. So you have the young, the rising stars, being editors of those volumes, and as soon as you put them in an editorial position, you empower them, and then opening gates for them, encouraging them for conferences, just giving them that opportunity to like in the AAR.
That's the American Academy of Religion.
The book that I was going to respond to is basically the rising stars, and what they've done is to critique the theology of the founders and see how does it apply. And sometimes they say, oh, the problems are still there, but maybe new questions on old issues.
Yeah. What are some of those new questions?
New questions on old issues. If I take, for example, family and children, that which is important, women and children, and those that don't have children, what role they have, society condemns them. The new questions are, how can we get children? What kind of science can help? There are few people who fear the science. And we are trying to say, the question of infertility, for example, is still there. How do we approach it? I think I was saying earlier that normally with infertility, the first person blamed is the woman. But people are asking wider questions, saying, no, let's find out what the issues are. So infertility is an old problem. The new questions are, how can it be fixed today?
Interesting. I had a question. Oh, I remember now. So one of the things that you have written about and talked about is the kind of challenges of publishing for members of the circle. Those are both sort of geographic challenges and also just the challenge of sort of being activists who are working in real world contexts. And when you're busy being an activist, you don't always have time to sit down and write a manuscript on what you're doing. So can you talk a little bit about what those challenges have been?
Yeah, the time and space.
Yeah. I would say power also. I said geography, but like also sort of like neo-colonialism and
just the space. Writing needs safe spaces, it needs environment where you have to think and do it. Many of the circle members who work in the continent, they're struggling to put food on the table. So you don't have the many hours of thinking and writing. That's a challenge. Secondly, I know that at the birthday of Mercy, one of the circle members said, can we now try to do volumes ourselves rather than doing communal volumes? The reason for communal volumes is that then you're supporting each other. But perhaps we have reached a point where now the younger scholars can start writing manuscripts themselves, partly because the terrain has changed. Publishing still it is problematic. The cost of books, I know like now from 2019, we produced about 10 or 15 from the conference that has
10 or 15 books since 2019. Wow. But
sometimes distributing those to all the colleges.
Yeah.
Because people have to think about money and how will buy books or will we do the building. So even spreading those books to be read by academics is a challenge. But in terms of editorials and writing, the younger scholars, the rising stars have really put energy to it because the terrain is different. So we are churning out these books. Now you're asking yourselves, how will they reach out to the people who need them most? So when I've taught courses in this country, I haven't missed a book. You click and it is there. But if I'm teaching back home, I will be saying, can you read the chapters of this book? And maybe it's only one in the library. You're teaching 20 students. So how do they read?
So we actually have more access to the circle scholarship here.
You will, definitely you will.
Than students on the continent.
Those books are read more outside than back home.
So how do you prioritize who you kind of work towards gearing those publications towards?
First is to talk about the publications and to find ways in which they can be subsidized. And those that have internet resources, then you do them on issue. Because there is also internet is not one of these great global things. There are people for whom it is a WAD. It is not realized. So every situation is different, and every circle member, whatever they are, they try to reimagine, they try to be creative to ensure that those books reach where they're supposed to reach. There's no one answer that fits all.
Anyone else have any questions? So, one of the things that you talked about is the importance of kind of affirming the parts of culture that are affirming towards women and trying to do away with the things that are not. But I also say with religion too, both, I guess, religion and culture, there's been a tendency in sub-Saharan Africa to kind of create a monolithic picture of those things, especially I think in Western perspectives of what, for example, African culture is, right? It's a very diverse continent. So how have you all sort of challenged those stereotypes of culture and religion?
I think Chimamanda Ngozi talks about the danger of a single story. And there's a way in which, for lack of a better word, the West will just number African culture as being one monolithic culture, which it is not. It is varied, and it is understood differently by different people. There could be practices that are the same, there could be practices that are different. There are things as a Kenyan that shock me when I go to South Africa, but they're Africans. There are things that shock me when I go to Ethiopia, but there are things I could be there and I feel, oh, I identify with this. It's just one, I think academics should know more than that, that you can't just talk about American culture. What is American culture? What is British culture? And when? When? So it is just to be able to be critical, so that even when the African women write, they'll say, I'm writing from this particular perspective. As Marcy was speaking, one of the colleges here, she says, I'm not speaking about Africa, I'm not an expert of the whole of Africa. Neither am I speaking, but I'm speaking as a member of the circle concerned. So you have your limitations. So whether there are things that are similar, there's a bit you are an expert in, but there are things that you are not. So avoiding generalization. And that's why one, if you find people writing the same thing from different perspectives or from different ethnic communities, and they're able to read each other's work and see what they identify with and what is difficult, and the journey goes on.
Has that been a challenge when you think about sort of global feminisms? I mean, especially kind of encountering, you mentioned Western feminism and how there's a sort of hesitancy with that.
I think in one of the articles that is written by Isabel Piri and Sabine Nada from South Africa, they would say there are aspects that we would identify with in terms of recognition, for example. But there are also aspects that we will see Western feminists not understood that they have been in positions of privilege. Yeah, so if you look at colonial context, you will discover that it was white man. So the African woman will still be at the bottom of her. So say, no, my sisters, you are enjoying the privileges there. So you can't feel what we feel. Right? And that's what, but we can dialogue. It's not saying that, but we can dialogue and we can learn from one.
So dialogue and learn while kind of also acknowledging the privilege that.
Yes. Just like I would acknowledge my privilege as an educated woman. I come from a position of privilege because I have a PhD, I teach. And there are those that within the church do not have PhDs. So sometimes you are respected because you learn of what you have. And so it's acknowledging that privilege, you are in positions of privilege. For example, if I was the daughter of a bishop, I have different privileges, or a wife of a bishop. So acknowledging that wherever you have those privileges, but you don't use them against the other, but use them to uplift the other.
I think we have time for one more question, if there is one. Extension. Well, Dr. Mombo, thank you so much. So tomorrow, again, you'll be Mills A at 7 o'clock, speaking on the social face of pandemics. Do you want to give them a teaser, what you're going to talk about tomorrow?
Written is a teaser. Then they will not come.
Okay, thank you all so much.
Make a quick announcement.
Yeah.
Next Wednesday, our afternoon discussion will be presented by Dr. Penner and Dr. Merrick. And it'll be connecting with nature, why it's good for you, your community, and the planet. So please come next Wednesday and also come tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. Thanks, everybody.